Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Impactors Innovation Talk series. Thank you all for being here today, and especially to all our speakers for their precious time. Thank you to our corporate partner, Naya, and our community partner, ID Club Pulchok Campus, for helping us with the organization. I'm Sheetal, a proud member of Impactors and your host for today. For those of you who don't know about Impactors, we are a group of motivated individuals who want to encourage young people in Nepal to innovate in the fields of STEM by providing them with the opportunities and the tools to get there. Impactors organizes various workshops, talk sessions, internships, and research programs to give young students an insight into the world of STEM and to give them an opportunity to learn by doing. Feel free to visit our website for more information about our projects. Through this series, we want to give students the chance to learn about the exciting technological innovations that are happening and shaping our future. And more importantly, have the chance to connect with people who are bringing these innovations to life. To give you a brief agenda for today, we will now have 5 speakers presenting their talks, each being 15 minutes long. We won't be taking any questions during the talks, but don't worry, you can meet our speakers again after the talks during our networking event on GatherTown. It will be 45 minutes long, so you have plenty of time to ask your questions then. I hope that everybody made it to the GatherTown Zoom link. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Elisa Garcia Corisco. Ms. Corisco works as a project and feature engineering team leader of the ExactTrack Dynamic Technology at BrainLab. She has more than 6 years of experience as a software developer, along with 4 years of developing ExactTrack and 2 years researching how technology can help in the treatment of lung cancer. Today, Ms. Corisco will be talking about how thermal 3D technology is being used for improving radiotherapy treatment. Please take the stage, Ms. Corisco, and feel free to share your screen. Thank you. Please unmute.
I tried already.
Are you muted again?
Why? Yeah, now.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much again. Very nice presentation. Let me share my screen then. This is the big one. This is screen 2. And then, do you see my screen? I guess so. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to talk to you about how with the Thermo 3D technology we have improved the radiotherapy treatment. First of all, I would like to tell you a little bit about me. So I have been already presented, but I come from Barcelona, Spain. There I have studied telecommunication engineering because I went to some talks where they were talking about how the technology could help physicians and also the medicine and the patients. And I saw that that was such an important thing that I really was looking forward for following that way. They told me that they had studied this telecommunication engineering, so I followed their steps. After that, I thought, where can I follow? And I thought that Germany was a really good place for doing that in Europe. Then I moved to Germany, where I finished my studies in Darmstadt, and I finally finished in BrainLab developing algorithms. After developing algorithms for 2 years, I started working on ExactTrack Dynamic, as you already know, and that machine is really, really, really cool because it really allows to treat the patient with an accuracy under millimeter, and that was something that it wasn't achieved before. Apart from that, I also have a family. I really enjoy to spend time with them, with my daughter, with my husband, and also friends outside and traveling. Let me
Sorry, Aliza, your screen is not being shared.
Why not? Share. Now, the agenda. Sorry.
Thank
So
you.
it's my beautiful photo. It's fine. So we have so today I'm going to talk, first of all, a little bit about the 4D tracking, how it works, so the 3D plus thermal surface information. After that, I will follow with how the radiotherapy workflow looks like a little bit in order to bring you an overview about what it's about. And then I will follow with Xtract Dynamic, a small presentation about the hardware and demo of the software. For the tracking. So which is the goal? The goal is that with one surface camera, we have to be able to track the movement of some small regions of the target region. So the region where the tumor is. We don't care actually if the leg moves, if the breast where the tumor is doesn't move, because what we want is to ensure that the part where the tumor is doesn't move at all. And why do we want these small regions too? For example, in order to be able to use open face masks. What is that? At the very beginning of the radiotherapy, for the cranial treatments, we started fixing the face of the patients with screws in order to make sure that they don't move. Obviously, this wasn't quite comfortable, so we designed the closed face mask. This closed face mask, they cover the complete face and they don't allow any movement. Obviously, for the patient, it's not that comfortable in the sense that it is quite claustrophobic. And also, in case that they can move a little bit, we can not even realize about it. Why not? Because the mask is covering. So if any movement occurs inside, we don't see it. That's what we want. We want to be able to treat with open face masks. These open face masks will allow the patient to breathe, to be more calm, to be more comfortable. But on the other hand, it will allow him also some more movement. And for that, it is very important that we are able to track this area here, which is quite small. Apart from that, what we want to be able to track also the area of the breast, for example, so extracranial areas. And these areas are quite flat and they don't have much information. That means that with only one surface camera, it would be quite complicated to be able to follow the movement. Whereas we also would like to be able to follow the breathing curve. Why do we want that? Because with that, we are going to be able to treat much better those indications that where the tumor is in a point close to the respiration, that means that the tumor moves with the respiration. And if we know how the patient breathes, then we can open or close the radiation beam depending on the breathing phase. So let me show you the main concept. So imagine you have like a table just with a solid color, and then you select an area you want to track. This area, it is exactly the same as the rest as the table. So when you move the table, what happens? Does the area follow? No, it doesn't follow because it is not able to find again the point, the area that we wanted to track. So what do? We paint that table. We paint it with a lot of colors, allowing that when we have an area, it has an own pattern. It is unique. And then as long as we move the table, we can follow because we can find again that pattern. So then you have to imagine that this color is the temperature. For each single point of the 3D surface, we add the fourth dimension of the temperature. And with that, we are able to paint the body with colors. And so that we can distinguish each area as a unique area. And this is actually the main concept of the 4D tracking. Why do we use this thermal camera instead of just, for example, a video camera. A video camera would also give us one point, one color for it. This is because we also need to be able to be illumination insensitive and also to be able to treat any kind of skin. And this is something that it is allowed with the thermal information. Let me go now through the radiotherapy workflow. First of all, we need to acquire CT images and MRI images. We are going to fuse them, to register them in order to have the bone information and the organs information into one. Then what we are going to do, we are going to draw the tumor, draw the organ at risk, and everything that it is important for the treatment. And after that, we are going to compute the dose, the planning. It is very important to know which are the organs at risk to plan accordingly in order to try not to give so much radiation dose to those organs. And then finally, the patient will come and it will arrive to the treatment room and it will lay on the table. And then we have to bring the patient into the treatment position. That means into the same exactly position as it was when the CT scanner was taken, because we have planned with the images of the CT scanner. So then we have to ensure that we can bring that patient into that position. For doing that, first of all, we do a rigid fusion between X-ray images and DR images. The DR images are it's like an X-ray image based on the CT scanner. With this fusion, we are able to bring the patient into a treatment position, but we don't want only that, but we want also to be able to monitor the patient during the complete treatment in order to make sure that if the patient moves, we are able to stop the treatment and reposition it again. Well, here is when it comes into play the 4D technology, because it is a technology that, as you can see here, we select this small area and we are tracking during the whole time. The X-ray images is only one point in time, but with this technology, we're able to monitor for the whole treatment. Here is where exact track dynamic takes place during the positioning and the treatment. So let me show you the hardware. Here you can see this is like how a treatment room looks like, a little bit more beautiful because it's marketing, but you have this big machine here, which is the LINAC accelerator, which is in charge of radiating, creating the radiation. Then we also have here the table. This table has 6 degrees of freedom in order to be able to move as much as needed to set the patient in the right position. This all belongs to a third party. And here down we have the X-ray generators, the X-ray panels in charge of the X-ray images. And here up we have the cameras, both of them surface and 3D camera. Good. Now let me guide you shortly through the software. So we load the patient, first of all. And then the first thing that we want to do is to bring the patient into a rough treatment position. We are going to do that by with the surface information. Here we are going to use only the surface information, but the whole surface. We are going to use the whole surface and we are going to compare it with the outer contour of the CT scanner. We are going to compute a match, so a shift that we are going to send to the table, and then we can bring the patient into the treatment position. As you can see here, we send the shift, the patient moves automatically to the treatment position. After that, what we want to do is to select which area we want to track during the complete treatment. This is a really crucial point in the because we have to decide what is important during the treatment. Here we have already the thermal information, as you can see, and we select our area of interest. In that case, as this is open face mask, we select the eyes and the nose. We confirm, and then we acquire X-ray images. We acquire X-ray images, which it tells us where the patient is. And then we compare it with the CT scanner. And with that, we are able to compute a shift to bring the patient into the treatment position. Here you have this shift, and we can send the shift. Let me show you. We can send the shift, and we can take again X-ray images to make sure that the patient is actually in the treatment position. That means that the fusion should say that the shift is 0 or almost 0, as you can see. So now we're going to see is the treatment. During the treatment, we are able to acquire also X-ray images and to monitor, as you can see here, the patient. This monitoring, here you can see the distance bars. That means how the patient is moving now. And you will see now that as soon as the patient moves out of the tolerances that the physician has defined, then we show that everything in red and the treatment is stopped. We stop the treatment, we stop giving monitor units, as you can see here, and the user can reposition the patient and bring it again to a treatment position. And so we can ensure that the treatments are with an accuracy under millimeter. So that was everything from my side. Thank you very much. I just wanted to tell you that technology really can make an impact. It makes an impact, that every single thing that you do can make an impact, and it's also in your hands to do it, to use it for a good thing. Thank you very much. So, Sheta, I'm ready.
Thank you, Ms. Corisco, for your interesting talk. If you have any questions for Ms. Corisco, please save them for the networking event at the end of the talk session. You can personally ask your questions then. And now I'd like to move to our next speaker, Mr. Sri Pandey, Senior Director of Technology at Qualcomm, the world's leading wireless technology innovator. He works in the area of system architecture for the next generation of chipsets for mobile, computer, and other market segments. Prior to Qualcomm, Mr. Pandey has worked in hardware design at the Altera Corporation and in the area of satellite communication at Tachyon and Comstream. Mr. Pandey received his bachelor's degree at MIT and did his master's at the University of California, San Diego in electrical engineering and computer science. He also has over 24 patents granted to his name. In his talk today, he will discuss 5G and AI, which are the key ingredients for fueling the next generation of technology innovation. Please take the stage, Mr. Pandey, and feel free to share your screen.
You need to unmute yourself.
We're having audio issues. We're having issues listening to you, hearing you, Mr. Pandey. We can't hear you, unfortunately.
Okay, how about now?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Sheetal, for the kind introduction. Can you hear me okay? You can see my screen?
We can't see your screen yet.
Okay, let me share, screen share. Let's see, screen share. I think this is the right screen. Okay, how about now?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, great. Finally, we're on. Thank you. So good morning, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I want to thank the Impactors team for putting this together, inviting me to speak. Today, I'll talk about 5G and AI, two of the hottest areas of research. Both are individually disrupting industries and enabling new experiences. But what we see is that the combination of 5G and AI as being quite transformative going forward. Due to the limited time available, I'll only be able to speak at a high level, but hopefully that'll give you an idea of the impact this technology will have in the future. So I'll probably skip the slide since you've introduced me quite well. Suffices to say that I did my high school in Nepal and then came over to the United States for undergraduate studies, completed that at MIT, and then started working in a variety of companies, primarily initially satellite communications and digital design, and then went to Qualcomm, where I started working on the cellular communication technology. That's a brief introduction. I also completed my master's from UCSD later on as I was working. All right, so without, and I also enjoy teaching when I get a chance. I have taught at UCSD in the extension school a few years ago. All right, so I think let's get started with a quick introduction to what 5G is. I am assuming most of you have heard of it, if not used it. So hopefully this is going to be fairly straightforward for you. So if you look at the history, right, of mobile communication technology, we started the first generation in the 80s. That was primarily analog voice. And then in the 1990s, we saw the introduction of 2G, or the second generation, which supported digital voice as well as the ability for text messaging. This was a significant upgrade over the first generation. The 2000s saw the introduction of 3G, which is still quite widespread in many parts of the world. And that brought along with it mobile data capabilities, including email, multimedia, messages, and the concept of the App Store. And then we had 4G coming in 2010s, bringing mobile broadband, really allowing us to browse the web, stream videos, and make video calls as well. So now we are in the 5G stage. It's been a couple of years. 5G is already commercial in many parts of the world, and it vastly enhances the scope and capabilities of what we can do with internet. So one way to look at it is 5G is really a unifying connectivity fabric across the spectrum, services, and deployment models. And it's got the ability to connect virtually everything. It's really, it will support extreme mobile broadband, very high data rates. You can see some of the numbers in my next slide. And then also the other aspect is the support for mission critical services, which require very high reliability, ultra reliability, and ultra low latency, because any extra delay could be not tolerable in those mission critical systems. And then also this other concept of the massive Internet of Things, which is another key aspect, which will allow all kinds of devices to be connected to the network, and then you can control them very intelligently. So as I talked about, the speeds, this is, every generation, right? You go from 1G to 2G, 2G to 3G, etc. The speeds, of course, go up, and it's no different going from 4G to 5G. You can see some of the speeds here, orders of magnitude higher compared to the 4G in terms of download latency, speed, as well as streaming video performance. So today, 5G is a commercial reality, and Qualcomm, the company I work for, has played a key role in this. Making a new wireless technology commercial is no small feat. you need, starting from industry-leading R&D, contributions to standardization activities, creating end-to-end prototypes to illustrate the concept and make sure everything works, and collaborating with industry leaders to create those demos and interoperability, all of that. So all of that, it takes a long time. If you look at the history before, right, 1G to 2G, 2G to 3G, etc., it's about a decade cadence. So that's kind of how long it takes to get a new standard ready and deployed. So with this brief high-level introduction to 5G, let's switch gears and talk about how AI comes into the picture, and how 5G and AI will make each other better. So as we discussed, right, 5G is kind of this unifying connectivity fabric that'll connect virtually everything with extreme capacity, speeds, and ultra-high reliability and low latency. AI, or artificial intelligence, on the other hand, is a learning platform that can make virtually everything around us intelligent. It can solve extremely complex problems, take intelligent actions, and 5G and AI, when they work together, they can work together synergistically and to fuel future innovations. So let's talk a little bit about how they can work synergistically and make each other better. So, first, right, how will AI improve 5G end-to-end? This really requires a deep understanding of the overall 5G modem and the system so that we can apply it to the right areas where it can make an impact. At the heart of how AI will improve 5G is radio awareness. AI, right, rather than being a fixed algorithm, is the perfect tool to make sense out of this complex RF signals all around the device. As you're with your phone, you're walking around, the signal you're receiving is very different. The reflection from nearby other structures are very different. And so to be able to optimize the network and the radio parameters with that location, AI is a great tool to do that. And that kind of increased radio awareness is really what enables enhanced device experiences, and then it allows us to save battery life, improve security, privacy, all the things that AI can help improve. Now, so I've talked about how AI can improve 5G. Let's look at the other way. How can 5G improve AI? So this is, one of the key things, themes of my talk is how can 5G help AI, right? So if you look at the current approach, right, most of the AI training, and it's very concentrated in the cloud. And so one of the key things that 5G is going to enable is this concept of this distributed intelligence. So what we see is distributed processing. So in this architecture, we see the intelligence and data becoming more distributed and stored either on the device or in the edge cloud. And hence there are opportunities for computing both on the edge as well as up in the cloud. We'll still need the central cloud to process big data in terms of AI and ML, to do the AI training, such as deep learning. So that's great for less delay sensitive content. But our experience will be really augmented with what we call the wireless edge, if we're able to do processing right on the edge. And this is not necessarily a one-size-fits-all solution. You can trade off the latency, privacy, delays, depending on what kind of data you're processing, and decide to distribute the processing on the edge or on the cloud. So that's I think that's one of the key changes that we see 5G will introduce in the AI area, is this concept of distributed computing. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So the ultimate goal, right, would be, at least from this AI 5G perspective, to make everything around us more intelligent. Now the question is, how do we get? We've already talked about how doing the AI inference on the device will help. So you do the training, testing, all of that in the cloud, and the inference on the edge. Now the next step is going to be, beyond doing inferencing, can we also do some training on the device? If we can do that, that will lead to an era of distributed learning where our devices and experiences are regularly improving and becoming more personalized. So first, a little bit of motivation for distributed learning. Why do we want to do more AI on the edge, right? Is mobile, technology is the largest technology platform in human history. So with billions of devices out there with AI capabilities, it is becoming the pervasive AI platform. And so let's make use of that. The other aspect is that the mobile industry is truly unique in its ability to provide tech innovations to other industries. And AI will be no different. So mobile would drive a new technology and the other industries will slowly adopt it. The reason is just that unmatched scale with billions and billions of devices, rapid replacement cycles. People buy phones every couple of years, and then it's a very integrated and a tough environment to optimize. You've got small form factor. Your battery's got to last for so long. The phone can't get too hot. So whatever feature you optimize for mobile, it needs to meet all those stringent requirements, and then it becomes relatively easy for that for something designed and optimized for mobile to then take it to other industries. Okay. So this kind of goes without saying. There's tons and tons of data these mobile devices generate. Right? We've got data from the cloud. We've got on-device data like in our apps and messaging and calendar, and then we've also got sensor data from we'll take a lot of pictures, any audio recording, gyroscope, temperature, whatever you have. There's a ton of data that mobile devices will have, and there's so much data that it'll provide, if you use it the right way, and if you use that data with ML and AI, you can do incredible things. You can get a lot of insights. But the one challenge is we can't just send that raw data over to the cloud because, concerns with privacy, et cetera, right? So we need some level of on-device AI processing. But, and then that AI processing on the edge provides many benefits, such as, again, lower latency. You don't need to send everything to cloud. You can do it much faster. Privacy is better, and it's more personalized for you. So in the past, we would use cloud for training and inference. Today, we can do power efficient AI inference right on the device, on the phone. And in the future, the goal is that we will have fully distributed AI with lifelong learning right on the device. That would be really, that would really benefit and customize your user experience. So, so how does this work, right? Like, how would you possibly do this? So, one approach, right? Let me walk you through that. Is, again, as I mentioned, today training is done in the cloud. With distributed learning, we'll change that. The first step is that the central or the edge cloud sends the state-of-the-art AI model to the devices, and then each device would collect. Each device would collect the personal data, and then they would do some on-device training. Training, of course, is very computationally intensive, as we know, which is why the cloud has been the only choice. But by doing small training runs on the small data sets, the workload becomes more manageable. And oops, sorry, let me go back here. So the workload becomes more manageable, and so you could the edge device could do it. And then besides the capabilities, right, of these edge devices, AI capabilities have been increasing exponentially with improvements in algorithms as well as software. So assuming that we can do this on the device, there are three very important benefits. One is the scale, as I talked about, so many mobile phones out there that can be doing this. Personalization, based on your usage model, your use cases, it'll personalize the AI experience for you. And then privacy, which is the raw data never needs to leave the device. So what that means is that once we get this, the device, the edge device gets the model from the server, then you would add some perturbations to that parameters of the AI model based on your local training, and then send that back to the server. That way, you're not really sending the raw data, so you preserve your privacy, but at the same time, you are making or taking advantage of that extra capacity of the server by sending it back. And then but then the question is, how do you maintain privacy, right? And that's what I mentioned, is you could add some perturbations, add some noise to obfuscate the data. So you will kind of, dither the data a little bit, and so the personal details are not revealed. And then when it goes to the and then encrypt it, send it back to the cloud or the edge, and then the cloud or the edge will do the additional processing. It'll update the model and then send it back to the device again. So you have this kind of a this loop, right? So you do this loop a few times, and then the hope is that you would make this better and better as you do a few more times. So yeah, I think that kind of explains a possible way how you could do this distributed learning. Now, it's still a new field, obviously. So what are some of the areas for further research in distributed learning, right? So one, this could include, you want to optimize the communication network to achieve the bandwidth reduction, because you are still frequently exchanging data with the cloud. Tackling the statistical heterogeneity of the data is important, because you're getting data from different sources. There's different formats, very different kinds of data. So how do you tackle that? That's important. Privacy, as we talked about, is very important. And then personalization is important, where you want to make sure that the global model that you got from the server is a good starting point for personalization. And then perhaps you could do some meta learning or some ensemble techniques to do further AI. And then the other aspect is that on the device, you want to have some lightweight AI models that can run efficiently and within the power envelope of the device. There could also be advanced topologies for distributed learning, such as peer-to-peer, multi-cloud, etc., that needs further research. And these are just some examples, right? As we go and use this more and more often, new challenges will come up, and new research areas to improve them will need to be figured out. So I think that concludes my presentation. I want to leave you with a few points. First, AI is making 5G better in the network as well as on the device. And then on-device AI processing is essential, this concept of this distributed computing. And even more so in the 5G era, because you've got all this capacity, all the devices are really connected. And so with 5G, it's really empowering a new computing paradigm, what we call the distributed learning over wireless. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the interesting talk, Mr. Pandey. If I'm not mistaken, you will not be joining us at the networking session later today.
Yes, most likely not. Unfortunately, it's about midnight where I'm at. I'm in California, and yeah, it's just the time difference might be a little bit hard. But if there's any questions, please feel free to contact me later on, and I'd be happy to discuss with you. Thank you.
Thanks. We were very glad that you were able to make it. And if you have any, to our audience, if you have any questions, you can also send us an email and we will forward them to Mr. Pandey.
Thank you.
So, and with that, to our next speaker. Our next speaker, Ms. Rachana Hada, you might know her already as the co-founder of Impactors. Outside of Impactors, Ms. Hada works as a senior software engineer and solution architect at Lara Lab, where she develops cloud-based next-generation cardiology software. She has a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and computer science from Jakobs University Bremen and did her master's degree in computer science at the TU Munich. Today, she will be talking about how AI is helping create new treatment options for heart procedures. Please take the stage, Ms. Hada, and feel free to share your screen.
Thank you, Sheetal. Let me try to share my screen. Okay, I believe you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to see so many of you here, and it's really my great pleasure to share my experience with you. And I hope I can help you learn something new about what we're doing. So introduce myself, I'm Rachana Hada. I have a master's degree in computer science from Technical University of Munich and a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and computer science from Jakobs University Bremen. I'm one of the co-founders of Impactors, so some of you have probably seen me in some of our previous workshops. Apart from Impactors, I'm also a senior software engineer and solution architect at Lara Lab. And at Lara Lab, we are developing the cloud-based cardiology software, as Sheetal mentioned. What we are trying to do is we're trying to use the AI to realize the next generation of the heart procedures. And that is what we'll be talking during our presentation today. We're talking about how we can enable the new treatment options with AI. So to start with, let's start from the very beginning and let's talk about the anatomy of the heart. Some of you might already be aware of this, so I'll just make it a very brief, short introduction. As we might all know, heart is one of the most important organs in the body, and the main purpose of the heart is to pump the blood throughout your body. So it transports oxygen and nutrients via blood, and it also collects all the carbon dioxide via the blood. And it has a lot of intricate structures that actually makes this whole process possible. And one of the main important part to do that is the heart valve. And there are 4 different valves in the heart. We have the aortic valve, the mitral valve, the tricuspid valve, and the pulmonary valve. And what this valve actually do is they work as the one-way gate to allow the blood to flow only in one direction. And it does that by opening and closing to a beat based on the pressure. And this here is an example of a well-functioning heart. So it opens wide and it closes snugly so as to only let the blood flow in one direction. But due to various reasons like the degeneration of the muscles or calcification or some other physiological conditions, these heart valves, they cannot function like they normally should. So you would have a problem like they don't open wide enough. So you have restrictions of the blood flow, or they don't close snugly enough. So you have the blood leaking the other direction. And these conditions, the problems of the heart valve not being able to perform well and not being able to do their job well are called valvular diseases. And what this actually leads to is something as simple as the shortness of breath or fatigue. So you won't be able to do even simple things like walking a short distance or climbing up the stairs. And in more grave situation, it might lead to more serious conditions like stroke or heart attack or heart failures. So it's very, very important to be able to detect these diseases and to be able to treat these valvular diseases. One of the ways to actually treat them is to replace the malfunctioning heart valve. So you would replace the natural heart with an artificial valve. in order to do that, for a very long time, up until 20 years ago, the go-to process was the open heart surgery. And what that basically meant was the surgeon would cut your chest open and they would stop your heart while they worked on the muscles and the valves and the arteries. And as you can imagine, this is a major surgery and it has a lot of risk associated with it. Not just that the process of the surgery is long, but the recovery period is also long, and you have to be at the hospital for a couple of weeks after the surgery. And apart from the mortality rates, apart from the death rate that can be resulted from this procedure, the morbidity rate or the other effects that you can have, like the strokes or the need for operation, or renal failure. So these risks are also very high. And because of this high risk associated with this open heart surgery, this surgery was not available to high risk patients, meaning patients with pre-existing conditions, patients of higher age, or people who generally have problems recovering from the surgeries. And what this means in the bigger picture is we already have the solutions, we have the treatment to solve these diseases, but you still can't make this available to a large number of population, and this life-saving treatment is not available to a large population. Then in 2002, 20 years ago, transcatheter aortic valve replacement procedure was introduced. And this was a revolution in the heart procedure, because what this did was eliminate the need to actually have to cut open the chest and stop your heart to work on your valve. And what this actually did was you would have to make a small incision on the lower part of your body, and via the arteries, you would then send a catheter, a small wire through your arteries. You'll reach the aorta, and then you, with the help of this wire, you would actually just replace the valve. And as you can see, this is much simple procedure compared to the open heart surgery, and the risk associated with it is also less. The surgery time takes less, but also you can go home after a few days, and you don't really have to stay in the hospital for a long time. And because of the low risk that came with this TAVR procedure, this valve replacement procedure was now available to a larger population, including the high-risk patients. And over the time, TAVR has now become like a gold standard, not just for the high-risk patient, but also the mid-risk patient and the low-risk patient. And this has been a big revolution in the way we do the heart valve replacement. Coming from the open heart surgery into the TAVR procedure. So with the open heart surgery, where you actually cut open the heart and you can see the heart, you can see what the valve looks like, you can check the sizing of the valve, you can decide on the placement of the valve. Compare that to a TAVR procedure where you're only sending a wire and you don't actually get to see the heart. This process is much more complicated, because then you don't really see the heart, you don't have the visual cues, you don't really know what's happening, and you have to rely on the wire. So in order to make this possible, a very important part of actually making that happen was the development in the cardiac imagery. So computed tomographic images, or the CT images, with the development of these images, you could actually see the whole structure of the valve, of the heart, without actually having to cut it open. For example, in this CT scan here, you can see the 4 different chambers of the heart. And having this with us, having the possibility to actually analyze the heart without having to cut it open, meant it opened a brand new window to things you can do with it. And that's how the TAVR was made possible. So now we have the TAVR that has been proven to be very successful. And then we have the cardiac imagery, which has helped make this TAVR procedure possible. So do we then have the same equivalent treatment for the other valves, for example, the mitral valve or the tricuspid valve? Unfortunately, even though we've seen a lot of success with the transcatheter approach in the aortic valve, we haven't been able to do the same for the mitral valve and the tricuspid valve. And most of it is due to how complicated and how different the mitral valve and tricuspid valve are compared to the aortic valve. For example, here when the heart beats, you see that the aorta, it doesn't really change too much. So the aortic valve, the size and the shape of the aortic valve remains more or less consistent, compared to the mitral valve and the tricuspid valve that change when the heart contracts. this contraction and then the change of the size and the shape of these valves make them significantly more complicated than the aortic valve. On top of that, the aortic valve actually lies within the walls of the aorta, within the cylindrical walls of aorta. So you have this predefined structure. Somehow you are aware of this cylindrical structure that you can expect for aortic valve. But for the mitral and the tricuspid valve, they don't actually have a wall surrounding them. So they are in between the atrium and the ventricle. So you don't actually have a symmetrical wall surrounding them. And there are many different shapes and many different sizes of these valves possible. And this asymmetrical shape of these valves makes it very difficult to have one solution that works for all the different kinds of valves. And these are some of the reasons why we haven't seen the transcatheter approach being so very popular for the other valves. Having said that, there are new procedures, there are new treatments, there are new devices that are under development and that people are looking into how to do that. And just like for the aortic valve, where you cannot see the heart because it's a transcatheter approach, the same applies also for these valves. And then just like for the TAVR procedure, you would then use the CT images to actually plan for the surgery. So what this basically means is when you have the CT, you would actually have to trace the valves around it. And because this is not the cylindrical wall anymore, you have to analyze the CTs very carefully to see where the two chambers actually end, the ventricle and the atrium actually end, to be able to detect this valve surrounding it. So you would have to carefully place the markers around it to trace it. But the thing is, heart is actually a 3D structure, and the CT images are more or less the 2D structure. And this valve, because it doesn't necessarily lie on the XY plane, the valve actually lies across multiple slices. So you would have to scroll through multiple slices to actually be able to correctly detect these valves. So you would place a marker and you'll scroll a bit more to find the other thing, and then you will scroll a bit more and you would continue this process. As you can see, this is very time consuming, and this is also a very tedious process. As a matter of fact, it takes even the most experienced surgeon at least 15 to 20 minutes to detect one valve, But so the heart is actually beating. It doesn't remain static. So it's actually beating. So the structure of your heart changes as it changes its position depending on which phase it is in. And the CT scans also change accordingly. So if you have to see how your valve looks like, how the dimension, how the size of your valve changes over time as your heart beats, you would have to analyze multiple sets of CT scans representing multiple phases of your heart. And if one phase takes you 20 minutes, if you have to do this for 10 different phases, that's already going to take you 200 minutes. That's 200 minutes of a very experienced surgeon spent just to plan one surgery. So because of the complications of the heart being in a 3D structure and the fact that the heart is actually beating, this makes the process of actually planning for these valves very challenging. So you need some very experienced person to actually be able to detect the valve and to calculate the dimension. It's also very time consuming. Like I said, it takes like 20 minutes for an experienced surgeon to just calculate the dimension of one valve. And this is also non-reproducible because this is a very manual process. So you're manually going through this, going through the CT slices, putting the markers there. You being able to reproduce the exact same thing at some later point in time is next to impossible. And then when we are dealing with the new developments where you really need to have consistent results to be able to analyze the results, this places significant strain on it because you don't really have the consistent data to start with. Okay. So what if we can actually optimize this process? What if we can actually make it more efficient, better? And what if we can automatize it? And what if we can use AI to actually make this happen? And that is exactly what we're doing at Lara Lab. We're using artificial intelligence, in particular deep learning, to automatize and to make this process more efficient and to optimize this process. We do the exact same thing the physicians do. So we start with first analyzing the CT images. We check the CT images to see what they look like, to detect all the different structures. And based on that, we can actually segment the heart anatomy. So like in here, the 4 different colors represent the 4 different chambers of 4 different structures of the heart. And now when you have these 3D, you have segmented heart anatomies on each slice, and you do it on the multiple slices, what you can actually do is, based on this information, you can now generate a 3D image of the heart. The 3D image of the heart that you can actually look at from different angles to analyze what the different structures look like and how they work together and how they are fit together. Because of this this additional information that you have with the heart with the 3D structure, you can now then calculate not just the simple measurements like the dimension, the perimeter or the diameter of the valve, but you can also calculate more complicated measurements like the 3D contour of a valve, for example. And now when you put these 3D structures of all the different phases together, then you can actually create a 4D model of the heart, with the 4th dimension being the time. And what this means is you can see what the heart looks like as it beats. And like in this case, you have the mitral valve in here that is beating, and then you can see the other structures surrounding it changing over time. And this allows you to actually be able to analyze the structure of the heart to see what it actually looks like without having to cut it open. So now, coming from the current approach where you are manually drawing, you're putting the tracers by going on the grayscale image of the CT scan, compared to the AI approach where you have an automatically generated 4D model of the heart, this solves a lot of problems we have. So the challenges that we had of needing the expert is not needed anymore, and you have a very reduced effort because you have the automatic process that actually doing it. And for the time, that takes 200 minutes to actually do it for the over 10 phases, you can actually do it in less than 5 minutes. And you can do it in less than 5 minutes, but also you have a better visualization, because now you can actually see what the heart looks like, and you're not just dealing with the CT images anymore. And most importantly, the problem that we had with the non-reproducibility in the current approach, that is now solved with the AI approach, because you get the consistent results all the time. So what does this actually mean when we're talking about the new treatment and when we're talking about the future of cardiology? First, it actually makes the it actually makes the current procedures and the current treatments scalable, because now with the reduced cost and the reduced time, you can actually treat more patients at the same time, in the same time. Instead of spending 3 hours to just plan one surgery, you can use that time to treat more patients. And on top of that, it actually also opens multiple opportunities as to what you can do in the future. Now being able to see the heart in its full form as it beats without actually having to cut it open, it then allows you to think of different procedures, think of different treatment methods that you can employ to solve the existing valve conditions. And also when you're doing the further development for the new treatment or devices, it makes things like simulating how the device would look like when you put it in the heart much easier. And this opens a bigger window to what we can do to solve these valvular diseases. And at the end of the day, it's about how we can make the current approach more efficient and how we can optimize it more to solve bigger problem, which is then to actually solve what is then to improve the quality of life of millions of people and save millions more. And with that, the AI that we have, because it simplifies so many things and it automatizes so many things, and it opens up new opportunities. It helps us go into the next generation of cardiology, moving forward from where we are now. It helps us to move into the next generation of cardiology, and it opens up more possibilities to save more lives around the world. And we look forward to seeing how we can use AI and how we can help develop the new treatments and procedures that drive the changes in the future. That brings me to the end of the talk. If you have any questions, I will be available for the question at the end of the talk during the networking session. Thank you.
Thank you for the very interesting talk, Ms. Hara. Looking forward to seeing you at the networking session later on. With that, our next speaker is Mr. Hannes Rupling, who is currently working as the head of flight line H135, H145 at Airbus Helicopters in Germany. He started his career as a mechanical engineer in 2013. Mr. Rupling's talk will provide us an insight into the latest trends and developments in the aviation industry, how they can be realized, and where we are headed next. He will also tell us about how mechanical engineers contribute to these developments and share his own experience working in the aviation industry. Please take the stage, Mr. Rupling, and feel free to share your screen. We can see your screen, but we can't hear you. We can't hear you. You're unmuted, but we can't. No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Okay. It was a setting issue. Okay. Next thing is the PowerPoint presentation. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, it's perfect. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I will start again. Thank you so much for inviting me today to the Impactors Talk series. Today I would like to give you a little insight what aviation industry is all about and what are the current trends of development in aviation industry and how a mechanical engineer can provide this change and drive this change and what it's working like as a mechanical engineer in aviation industry. Okay. First, a little bit to my person. I studied aeronautical engineering at the Technical University of Munich, and I joined Airbus Helicopters, which was in 2013. At this time, Airbus Helicopters was named Eurocopter, and after we merged within the complete Airbus group. I started there in mechanical engineering, and I took care of deviations in the production process and try to solve them. Currently, I'm working as head of flight line, H135, H145. What am I doing and my team are doing? We're getting the complete helicopter, and we're taking care of the first start of the helicopter and providing the necessary services to our test pilots to get the helicopter first airborne, for sure, do the troubleshooting. And after all of this, we are ensuring to get a perfect product to our end customer and delivering it together with our program managers. In my talk, I will give you in the first part a general overview about the aviation market and how it's all about, and in the second part, how you as a mechanical engineer or as an engineer can work within the aviation industry. As I'm working for Airbus, this talk will a little bit be Airbus focused. Nevertheless, it can be switched over to all of the aviation industry. In the aviation industry, we have more or less three market segments. We have the commercial aviation, which is the most famous one. It's the passenger aircrafts, mainly freighter aircrafts, and these are the big aircrafts. In Airbus, it's It's provided and done by Airbus Commercial, which is one of our group segments. The second segment is the general aviation. And the general aviation is very diverse. It's private aviation, it's corporate aviation, but it's also, for example, emergency medical services aviation. It's law enforcement, for example, police aviation. Police mainly fly helicopters. And the third market segment is the military aviation. All of these segments are covered within Airbus by Airbus Commercial, Airbus Helicopters, and Airbus Defence and Space. As I'm working for Airbus Helicopters, I will give you a helicopter focus. Nevertheless, there will be some elements from commercial aviation. The military aviation is spared out in this talk. So to give you a little overview, what all the missions are all about and what helicopters can do all over the world, I would like to show you a little video, which is also available on YouTube. If you have questions afterwards, please feel free to ask me. But now we'll have a look at the video. So you do see here the production of the video, service, the testing. Some of our customers, this is a new development from Airbus Helicopters, the H160. Last year we landed, you see we landed on the Aconcagua. But some years ago, we also landed on the Mount Everest, which is quite a task for a helicopter due to the simple height of the mountain. Okay, I think that's quite the end of the video. So what you saw here is the variety of missions helicopters can provide, emergency medical systems, but also normal corporate missions. Okay, facts about aviation industry. Aviation industry is quite huge. The total number of employed jobs is about 87 million jobs worldwide, which are somehow connected to aviation industry. And we have about 11 million direct jobs. What are direct jobs? Jobs like I am currently doing is a direct job. For example, the taxi driver who is operating at an airport, the bakery at an airport, and these are indirect jobs. The financial impact about aviation industry is about $3.5 trillion. It would mean if aviation industry was a country, it would be the 17th largest country in the world. So there is a huge network behind, and aviation is a really international business. About passenger numbers, and now I'm talking about the normal commercial aviation. We were facing about 4.7 trillion passengers. And here in this chart, you see a significant drop due to COVID. and aviation is currently recovering. So we are in a good way, and we are expecting to get there where we were. Nevertheless, there is still a little bit of a way to go. About the number of airplanes operated on the world, it's about 22,000 airplanes operated. And for the market and what we are currently facing in the aviation, we do see an increase about 60%, which means with the replacement, we are expecting in the next years, so until 2040, to build around 40,000 new aircraft. For sure, this is all over the industry and not Airbus focused. But what I want to say with this, there is a huge potential for work, for engineering work, for production work. So a lot of work available. Okay, coming to the fields of research, and for sure these are only exemplary ones. One big field of research is how to fly with zero emissions. At the moment, we are mainly using fossil fuels, and we all know that the CO2 footprint is a very, very important topic to tackle. In the meantime, while getting to flying zero emission, we are developing sustainable aviation fuels, which are mainly made out of food waste or organic waste. And a very interesting field of research from my point of view is the urban air mobility. It's about drones. It's about how to operate in mega cities. Now I wanted to give you a little insight on these three fields. So, for zero emission, we are currently developing hydrogen airplanes. This was not intended to happen. I'm sorry. Okay, nevertheless, the current development is aiming to fly with hydrogen. The current aim is to have airplanes available by 2035 around. For this, we need to design new airplanes and we need to test engines. And for this, at this point, Airbus took an A380 prototype and attached a fifth engine on top of the fuselage, inserted the hydrogen tanks, and currently we are testing how it could work and how the hydrogen technology is used in a large scale for aviation industry. You need to know an airplane is normally in the fuselage. You have all the passengers and the fuel is stored in the wings. If you have high pressure tanks for hydrogen fuel, this is not really possible to store these tanks in the wings due to the cylindric shape of the tanks. But we need to go somewhere into the fuselage of the airplane, which is creating less space for passengers. And we somehow need to find a good balance for the passenger space, for the tanks, and for sure need a safe working environment for all the engines and also the fuel. I'm very sorry that this video is not working. Don't know why. It's just a little animation on where these tanks are stored for the test demonstrator and how the engine is working. The second topic I want to talk about, and this is for me a quite important one, as it is an intermediate step on the way for zero emissions, is sustainable aviation fuel. The aim is to get rid of fossil fuels, meaning converting oil into gas and burning the gas. The fuel can be used in the existing aircrafts, and it's made from organic waste, mostly. For example, just imagine cooking oil or forestry waste or any other waste from feedstock from animals. These wastes are converted into fuel, and at the moment, the conventional fuel is blended with this sustainable aviation fuel up to around 20% and is delivered to the aircraft and burned. The aim is to fly with 100% sustainable aviation fuel, which can reduce the CO2 impact overall by around 80%. Currently, we are in test phase for Airbus helicopters. We flew in test conditions, we flew with 100% sustainable aviation fuel. And at the moment, we are in the certification phase to get it to the commercial market. The third topic, which is for me a very, very interesting topic, is the urban air mobility. If we are thinking about a mega city, what is the main challenge we do have? Is first of all, it's space. Where do we land with a helicopter? If we are talking about normal planes in a mega city, it's not possible because we need somehow a runway and the space is not available. Therefore, we are switching to helicopter-like aviation solutions, which are meaning normal helicopters, but also, which you can see over here, these unmanned aerial vehicles. At the moment, the aviation industry is developing these vehicles. There are a bunch of very, very interesting startups, but also the existing big aviation industries like Boeing and Airbus. They are developing for themselves. The main goal is to use these transportation vehicles, for example, like a taxi, to call it like a Uber, to say I want to go from there to there and have it autonomous flying. But to get there, it's somehow a quite long way. What we are currently doing, we are partnering with a lot of different companies to see where we can land, to have the heliport infrastructure available, to have the IT infrastructure in behind, and to develop the vehicle itself. What's the most important thing for the vehicle? We need the range. We need for sure the reliability. There are people sitting inside and it has to be safe and it will be tested quite intense. But on the other hand, there is also an issue of the noise. Imagine there is such a little helicopter landing in front of your window in a mega city and it's making hell of a noise. The society would not accept this. And therefore, a big initiative is how to reduce the noise at these helicopters. Okay. These were the three fields I wanted to show you. So for me, very important is to fly without any emission. To get there, we need some intermediate solutions, like, for example, the sustainable aviation fuel, and very interesting field, the urban air mobility. But what it's all about, working as a mechanical engineer in aviation industry. For sure, nowadays, it's a lot of computer work. And if we do have a look at the A380, for example, the A380 is consisting of around 4 million individual components. Meaning you have every bolt, I have just brought you a bolt. This would be one of these elements. And all of them have to work together and fit together. Meaning, if you are an engineer, you are working in a field and all the aircraft is divided in different function areas. The so-called ATA chapters is, for example, the structure. It's the engines, it's the equipment. If you're focusing on the structure, as an example, you can work at the fuselage or at the wing. If we are focusing on the wing, of an aircraft. For sure, the wing is generating the uplift and makes the aircraft flying. Therefore, you have to grant how it's called, the airfoil, meaning we have to design according to our simulations and tests. We have to design the foil, we have to design the wing, and we have to grant that it's stable. There is a big spar in it, and all of these little parts can be broken down in a lot of drawings. And in the end, there is a drawing of the elementary part. And this drawing is connected to a bigger drawing, which is a little assembly. This little assembly is going to a bigger assembly. What I wanted to tell, you need to talk to your colleagues, you need to harmonize. You need to review whether your design is fitting to the other designs. You need to stay in your design space. You cannot extend a part because maybe you're working in the design space of a colleague, and in the end, it will not fit. So all of this is a huge work which takes years and years. And as we are not doing all of ourselves, meaning we are working with over 1,500 different companies from over 30 countries in the world producing the parts. We're working together with them. We are offloading the work. And as a design engineer, you have also the responsibility to talk and to assure that the part which is produced is according to the specification. So for me, it's a very intense work, and I think it's fascinating because in the end you see such a very, very large aircraft growing. If you're talking about aircraft, it's about 70 meters long. So first part, for the development, a lot of work to do. The second part is if you're going into the production of an aircraft, like here. That's the production of an aircraft. On the upper picture, you see a fuselage of the aircraft from the inside during production. There is a lot of insulation inside. You see the spars here, you can see the windows. And for sure, if you're building up such a huge machine, not everything is every time going like it should. There is a part not exactly fitting, for example, or there is a simple error done by the workers. As we all, as humans, we are making mistakes. This is no problem. We can fix it. But as these parts are quite expensive in aviation industry, and that's the main difference to the car industry, for example, the car industry is simply replacing the part. Sure, we cannot replace a complete fuselage. For sure we could, but it's simply too expensive. You, as an engineer, you're called to production, and you have a look at the production, at the problem, and you need to find a solution together with the worker, together with a stress engineer, the designers, and you're designing a new solution for the individual aircraft, how it can be fixed or how it can be modified. Maybe it needs to be exchanged or just repaired at plates. This was my first job in aviation industry. I think it was very, very interesting because you get an overview over the complete aircraft. For me, these were helicopters. One day you're at the bottom of the helicopter talking about a hole. The other day you're on the top of the helicopter right next to the engine, thinking about how to fix a problem near to the engine. Therefore, I think it's very, very interesting to work in this international environment. You can travel all over the world to see where the aircraft are operated, where the problems are occurring. Therefore, I personally would encourage you, think about aviation industry. Why not? It's a cool field to work. It's a very innovative field to work. And this is somehow linked to the medical world, where Lashana just told you something about. It's also a highly controlled environment to assure the safety of our products. If you're interested in this, I'm happy to answer individual questions at the end. And now I'm leaving the floor to my next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roping, for these fascinating insights into the aviation industry and to your work. We'll see you at the networking session later today, and I'm very excited to now, moving on to our final speaker of the day, Dr. Alexandra Philipp-Taubadel, a research scientist at the German Aerospace Center. Dr. Taubadel received her doctorate in engineering in 2020 from the Technical University of Chemnitz. Since September 2013, she works as a research associate at the German Aerospace Center within the Aeronautical Communications Research Group. Her current research focuses on communication and surveillance systems for air traffic management, particularly on passive multistatic radar systems and the associated radar signal processing techniques. In her talk today, Dr. Taubadel will provide us with some insights into the surveillance technologies used for air traffic control and her research on providing accurate backup surveillance services for civil aviation. Please take the stage, Dr. Taubadel, and please feel free to share your screen.
Hi, everyone. I hope you hear me.
Yeah.
That is great. No more issues with the sound. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you for the invitation. Inspiring talks so far. We are quite a bit behind schedule, so I will try to get started. Let me see. I think. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Great. So yeah, just a few words about myself. You have already introduced me quite accurately. I am I'm a research scientist at the Institute for Communications and Navigation in the Aeronautical Communications Research Group at the German Aerospace Center. I am very passionate about airspace, about the aerospace industry generally, and very, very lucky to be able to work in this, do research in this field for quite a number of years now. In this talk, I'll try to give a very high level overview of some of the things I worked on for my PhD. Due to the time constraints and also due to the technical complexity of the actual PhD work, I'll not be able to go too deep into details. However, I hope to be able to give you at least a good overview of the main motivation and maybe touch some key aspects of the work itself. So let's get started. Surveillance. What is surveillance? Well, surveillance is one of the main components of an air traffic management system, responsible for periodically providing the aircraft position, altitude, and identity to the ground controllers. But how are the aircraft positions actually obtained? Two main categories of surveillance technologies exist. The cooperative surveillance technologies rely on the aircraft being equipped with a working transponder. A transponder is a piece of equipment in the aircraft which, among others, is responsible for replying to the interrogations that are coming from the ground. These replies are then received back on the ground and used to detect the aircraft and position it, which allows the ground controllers to ensure the safety separation of the aircraft in the sky. As we can see, most of the surveillance technologies out there are cooperative. Among these are the legacy secondary surveillance radar system, the ADS-B, so the automatic dependent surveillance broadcast, the wide area multilateration, ADS-C, or automatic dependent surveillance contract. While some other cooperative technologies are also currently being developed, like space-based ADSB, for example. Comparatively, on the non-cooperative side, we only have the primary surveillance radar. The primary surveillance radar does not depend on any equipment in the aircraft and only uses the reflection of the transmitted signals of the aircraft to position then the aircraft in range and bearing. Now, you can imagine that if this vital piece of equipment called a transponder in the aircraft, if something happens to it, if it shuts down due to over-interrogations, or if it is turned off voluntarily or involuntarily, or if simply the aircraft is not equipped with one, which is sometimes the case with the smaller general aviation aircraft, what happens then? Then the only surveillance alternative remains the primary surveillance radar. Nevertheless, the primary surveillance radar themselves, which are the only non-cooperative alternatives we have, they are being slowly phased out. Why is this the case? Well, on the one hand, they occupy very large frequency bands, and frequency spectrum is generally very scarce nowadays. On the other hand, they have very high maintenance costs. This is due to the very big antennas that they need to operate. And last but not least, they need a very high transmit power. So accounting for all these facts, the motivation for my work was the need to provide accurate backup non-cooperative surveillance services for as backup or alternative to the primary surveillance radar, for example, for critical civil aviation scenarios when the transponders are malfunctioning or intentionally switched off, or non-cooperative aircraft localization is required. And how do we do this? So our solution at DLR, my solution for my work, has been to set up an LDAX-based passive multistatic radar. Now, you will probably wonder, first of all, what is LDAX and what is a passive multistatic radar? So yeah, let's take it step by step. First of all, LDAX. What does it stand for? LDAX stands for the L-band Digital Aeronautical Communication System, and is, like the name suggests, a communication system that has been specifically designed as the future aeronautical air-to-ground communication link. This is currently undergoing standardization, the official standardization process. It has been developed by DLR at our institute in cooperation with partners, and it remains one of the core research topics in our research group. Next, so what is a passive radar? So a passive radar is in a way very similar to the primary surveillance radar that I mentioned. So it allows for a non-cooperative surveillance alternative, however, without the need for dedicated transmit signals. So instead of having to actively transmit signals, a passive radar generally uses transmissions of opportunity from the environment to detect the aircraft and estimate their position. And we will see in a bit how this works. Now, a passive multistatic radar, as you might have already figured out, is just an extension of the passive radar, which instead of using just one signal, one transmission, it uses multiple of them. And this is needed since usually, given the fact that we do not have control over the signals that we are using, since they are of opportunity, we need, in order to, increase the probability of actually detecting the aircraft, we did multiple independent sources. So now, simply put, my idea was to reuse the LDAX communication signals, which are already available. They are already, when the LDAX system will be functional and operational, they will already be available. They will be transmitted between the ground controllers and the pilots to use them as signals of opportunity for surveillance purposes. And this is shown very simply on the right. So LDAX is to be deployed as a cellular network. So we will have multiple ground stations. And if we are able to deploy additional surveillance receivers on the ground, which are receiving the different reflected signals of these ground stations, then we are able to provide a non-cooperative surveillance alternative. Now, you might wonder what distinguishes LDACs from other transmitters of opportunity. Well, first of all, what other transmitters of opportunity are out there? Actually, quite a few. So they can range from FM signals to telecommunication signals like LTE, to radio signals like the digital audio broadcast, or television signals like the digital video broadcast terrestrial. However, although there are so many opportunities out there, there have been also quite a few of operational challenges that have been identified in relation to actually being able to use these signals for civil aviation purposes. And in particular, there have been a range of reliability, integrity, and regulatory concerns which arise from the fact that these signals are third-party signals of opportunity, so one cannot really control them. And they are being sent in non-aviation safety frequency bands. Generally, whatever has to do with the civil aviation industry, you have to ensure that it is part of the aviation safety frequency bands. In addition to this, the antennas of these transmitters of opportunity are logically tilted towards the ground, since they need to serve the population. They need to serve us for mobile communication or for television or radio purposes. So implicitly, they will show a degraded altitude coverage if they need to be used to detect an aircraft which is in the sky. By comparison, the LDAC signals, like I already mentioned, they are dedicated aeronautical communication signals. They are being transmitted in aviation safety allocated frequency bands. They have also antennas already directed towards the sky, since they are used for the communication between the air ground controllers and the pilots, ground controllers and the pilots. And last but not least, if proved feasible, this surveillance extension of the LDAC signal would also allow for an integrated communication, navigation, and surveillance functionality, since the navigation extension of LDACs has already been looked into by one of my colleagues from the research group. Nevertheless, although we have so many advantages when compared to the other transmitters of opportunity, the reality is that also the LDAC signal is not perfect for surveillance purposes. And the main reason for this is that on the one hand is transmitted with very low power. And on the other hand, the fact that the signals themselves, they are not optimized for radar purposes. They are communication signals. And this can also bring a lot of challenges when trying to implement this operationally. So accounting for this, the main topic of my PhD work was to perform a feasibility assessment of the LDAC-based surveillance functionality. So what does this mean? So my work, I was in charge of trying to approach this functionality from different directions and see, okay, can we do this? And if yes, under what conditions, under what circumstances, what else can we achieve to allow for this? And the feasibility assessment can be separated in three main work contributions. The work behind all of these three contributions is very technical. I will not be able to go into details too much. However, I will try to give you at least a flavor by addressing one key aspect for each of these contributions. So the first contribution, I approached the system concept. So I was interested in actually defining the operational concept, assessing the link budget, the coverage, any requirements that might be needed. But first of all, to give you a bit of a better understanding of what it actually means, the extension from the communication to the surveillance application, as I already mentioned, so the LDAX is to be deployed as a cellular network. We see here the different cells with the different ground stations in the center of these cells, and we have the aircraft. And we have the ground stations which are continuously transmitting and talking, exchanging information with the aircraft. Now, if we are able to deploy additional receivers on the ground, which are shown as the other smaller receivers that we see in the cells, and if receivers can be set up such that to receive the reflections of the transmitted signals, then this will allow us to obtain the position. In theory, they will allow us to obtain the position of the aircraft, as well as estimate the velocity and so on, anything that might be of interest to us. The key advantage is the fact that the LDAX ground stations, they are meant to be widely distributed over the area that it's supposed to share. So let's say over Germany, there will be lots of this ground station, and this will enable us to receive, to observe the aircraft from multiple different aspect angles. So simply put, the reflections that will be arriving at the ground stations will come from different directions. And this is very important since this will increase, the more of these independent views that we have of the aircraft, the higher the probability that we will be able to accurately detect it and estimate its parameters. The main challenge, like I already mentioned, is the very low transmit power. So the LDAX signal is being transmitted with roughly 40 dBm. So this is like 10 watt. 10 watt is roughly the power of a light bulb. So as you can imagine, this is very low. As a result, the reflections that we are supposed to receive and that we are supposed to use actually for surveillance will be very weak, and they will have to be brought above noise level. Now, the second contribution, I moved from the system to the signal level. And here I had to approach the second biggest challenge, the fact that the signal, the LDAX signal itself, is not optimized for radar purposes. Well, what does this mean? This means that intrinsically, the signal structure is very much oriented for communication purposes. I am not sure how much of a background you have in this, but generally the signal has a lot of symbols that are not the data. They're not the payload that has to be transmitted, but other deterministic symbols, like there are pilot symbols, there are synchronization symbols, which are needed for synchronizing the system. They're needed for estimating the channel. They are not random, they are deterministic, and they are occurring in a repetitive fashion in the frame structure of the signal. And this leads to the arisal of many so-called signal ambiguities. And this is tried to be shown here in the plot. So very, for you to understand maybe very easily, for a radar application, we would like at best that each target, so each aircraft that is out there, is only appearing as a single peak, a single main lobe, so to say. So the way we would see here, for example. However, what we see here is multiple other side lobes, which are also having quite some power. So they cannot be just ignored. They are very critical to the radar operation, since logically they can either mask real targets. So we might not be able to detect real aircraft because they are covered, they are much weaker and they are covered by these ambiguities, or they can introduce false targets. Of course, if we do not know, we might as well assume that these are actual aircraft, which is also would create a problem in reality. So the main focus of this work part was to assess this ambiguity function, which is the plot you see here, to evaluate all these ambiguities. And the outcome is that as soon as we are able to properly understand their origin, so why do they appear, then we can easily, we are easily able to develop methods to mitigate them, such that we will be able, although we will be able to lose a bit in performance, we will at least be able to take them out of the picture to leave a clear main peak with only the true targets, so to say. And the last but not least, most important actually, contribution was addressing the actual radar processing part. So this was one of the most complicated parts of the work as well. But it's again related to the main challenge. So the signals that we receive on the ground, the reflected signals, are very weak. We need to bring them above noise to be able to detect the aircraft and estimate the parameters. So how do we do this? Well, in theory, one of the easiest way to do this is to just record as long of a reflected signal as possible. So get as much data as we can and correlate this with what we know has been transmitted. In theory, doing this would give us a processing gain, which is directly dependent on how long of a signal we used and the bandwidth of the signal we have. However, unfortunately, in practice, especially in our case, this does not work so well. And the reason for this is that the aircraft itself is moving very fast. So we would, in the LDAX case, we would need to integrate in the order of at least 2 to 3 seconds, at best 4 to 6 seconds, to be able to gain enough energy to bring the target above noise level. However, you can imagine in 6 seconds, the aircraft is moving quite a lot. And doing this without accounting for this, for the motion of the aircraft would actually have the opposite effect of what we would actually like it to do. It would just spread the energy of the aircraft even more. So to illustrate this, I show here 2 plots. So the first one is obtained when we integrate, in this case for 4 seconds, the reflected signal obtained from a single ground station. However, when assuming the target is stationary, so this would be the ideal case. When the target is not moving, we correlate for 4 seconds. We see that we have a very clearly defined spot. That is the target. That is the peak. We have brought it enough above noise to be able to detect it. And we would easily be able to see the delay, so the range, so to say, to the target. The Doppler in this case is 0. The Doppler shifts since the target is stationary. By comparison, if we see the plot below, here we assume a realistic movement of the aircraft in which it is moving for 4 seconds, the whole of the 4 seconds that we are trying to integrate over. And we see that in this case, instead of having the same behavior that would be ideally in the first plot, we see here that the target energy, so the amount of information that we have in that signal, is actually spread over the entire range Doppler delay plane. And what does this mean? Why is this not desirable? Well, on the one hand, you would imagine that if you would like to do detection based on these characteristics, you would not actually know where is the aircraft, since the pattern is very much spread over a range of delay and Doppler values. So even if this would bring you a bit above noise level, the ambiguity of choosing where the aircraft is to still remain very high. So this work part was mainly focused on accounting, so taking into account the motion of the target such that we compensate for this. We call them migration effects, since we would have a migrated target in this case. Now, I don't want to take any more of your time. I do have some backup slides, but I think we are already much beyond schedule. So thank you. And if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them during the networking part.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dalbadel, for being here and for giving us so many interesting insights into your research. And with that, that is a wrap for our talk session for today. We will now be starting the networking session. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you especially to our speakers for sharing their experience and insights with us. It was a very informative session, and I personally really enjoyed learning about where we are heading in the future in terms of innovation and all these really cool things that are happening already. Thank you very much to our corporate partner Naya and community partner IT Club Culture Campus, who made this event a possibility. Thank you to all the moderators at Gather Round for helping us out today. They'll also be there at the network session. In case you're confused, you can just go up to our moderators and ask your questions. So you can please feel free to exit this Zoom seminar and head back to GatherTown, where you can network, where you can go to our speaker rooms and you can speak directly with them and ask them any questions that you have. The session will end at 10:45. So you can start exiting right away. Thank you all for being here. Have a good day ahead and see you at GatherTown. Bye.
Thank you.